at some point. Okay. At this time, we will hopefully everyone has been able to look at the minutes from the last board meeting. And if you have any corrections or additions, we would take them at this time. Anything at all? Nothing? Okay, if there are no additions or corrections, the minutes will stand approved as distributed.
So moved.
Under the new Roberts rules, if there are no corrections,
That's right.
yeah, we can have them as distributed. All right. I don't have any comments for me from the chair. And at this point, we can move to Ms. Pinninger.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to acknowledge the passing of Ms. Alma Speed Fox today. Alma was the mother of civil rights in Pittsburgh, personal mentor of mine. We wouldn't be able to do what we do now before Alma, what we can do after Alma. She was a huge influence, and in that regard, her immortality will remain embedded in community life in the city of Pittsburgh. She was a remarkable lady. She's going to be missed, but her influence will remain, and she will be unseen and unheard, but always nearby. I'm going to miss her. Okay, intake for the year 2021 is totaled out at 227 complaints, of which 11 were general service inquiries, 4 were executive director inquiries, 9 that were outside of our jurisdiction, but redirected by Ms. Gamble to the appropriate authority for the individual to seek assistance. 5 were out of time, and we remain with 164 pending complaints from 2021. Thus far for this year, for 2022, I believe we have 14 complaints so far. Stephanie, you just sent that to me, and is that right? 14?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
So that's for the month of January?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
this is the 25th?
Yes.
Okay.
We're all familiar with a public hearing that was directed by the board some time ago in case number 23019. We had tentatively planned to have a pre-hearing conference on that case this month, but we were unable to clarify and resolve a couple of issues in that investigation, and unable to secure everyone's availability for tonight. So what we're asking the board through the panel, the hearing panel, which I believe Dr. Gershio chairs, is that we set the date for the pre-hearing conference for February 22nd, which is our next scheduled board meeting. If that works for our panel, we will then confirm with the principals and serve all the paperwork, the subpoenas, etc.
So that will be at 5:30?
Yes, ma'am.
That's
I
fine.
believe that our hearing officer, you may want to move that to about 5:35, 5:40.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, on Tuesday afternoons, I teach a course at Pitt Law School from 3:40 to 5:30. And in fact, I borrowed a laptop to be able to join you tonight. So I am broadcasting live from University of Pittsburgh School of Law. I would need sometime, but that's going to spill over into the 6 o'clock start for the monthly board meeting. The alternative would be to pick a date other than that Tuesday.
Mhm. Is Tuesday the only day that you teach?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm flexible.
yeah, I'll be flexible too. So could we look at well, we want it before the board meeting, correct? So that we can share.
What we do is we've scheduled it before the board meeting, so it's less of an inconvenience for board members because you would be coming to the board meeting.
Yeah,
I would suggest maybe that either that following Wednesday or Thursday.
okay,
I
Gives
could
us
do
enough-
it. I could do it, but I just don't think it would be done by 6 o'clock. That's my only point. So if you were to start at 5:45 and we'll be done at 6:15, does that louse up notices under the Sunshine Act or whatever for a 6 o'clock start? So I don't want to inconvenience the panel at all. I'm just saying that if we do start later than 5:30, like 5:45, we won't be done by 6 o'clock.
Again, I'm flexible. Or we would do this remotely, or are we doing this in person?
Probably remotely is my guess.
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Remotely.
I thought it would be remotely.
Okay, that's fine. I'm flexible. I can do it another day.
Beth, can we change the time because of the Sunshine Act?
Yes, we can change the time. And if you're not in an executive session when you're conducting a public hearing, a pre-hearing conference, that's a public meeting. So
Okay,
anyone who would come, we would just have to open it on the same webinar link. And then anyone who comes in, if you run over, you're still at the same location, everything would be fine. The meeting might start a little bit later, but we'll just notice that pre-hearing conference will precede the meeting. So the general meeting may start later than 6, and then we're good. We're good with that. That's okay. That's acceptable under the sunshine.
okay. So maybe we can say 5:40 or 5:45, make it even, 5:45?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you. Hopefully there will not be any further changes to this, and this thing will be taken care of. Just as an advance, pre-hearing conference cannot be held sooner than 15 days prior to the public hearing. So in reverse, we can't have the public hearing until there's 15 days after the pre-hearing conference, which would put the earliest scheduling date for the public hearing into the week of March 15th. So that's, as you're thinking about it, we would set that date firmly at the pre-hearing conference on February 22nd.
okay,
Because we still have the 10 days notice to give to the public, but that'll be
Mhm.
covered for the pre-hearing notice. Okay, thank you. The TASER report should be ready for your review at the February meeting. The densest report after action review of the incidents that happened in East Liberty in May 30th and June 1st of 2020 will be ready for you for March 22nd. It's entering its final staff review, final draft stage now. There were a couple of incidents that occurred that were newsworthy that you may have heard about. One was an alleged sexual assault by a female police officer, alleging that a male police officer sexually assaulted her while they were off duty and drinking. The letter that she sent made the news. It was written on December 27th, and it was sent bureau-wide to all members of Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. we also received a copy of the letter. The allegations contained within that letter are very disturbing. The author of the letter, this happened in June, did make a complaint internally. There was an investigation. It went through the process of the investigation and recommendations for discipline, which we understand went through the chain of command up to and including consensus of all command staff that the officer should be terminated, the accused officer should be terminated. The Department of Public Safety director at the time declined to accept that recommendation and made the decision that the officer would remain on duty. And I believe there might have been a 3-day suspension. I don't recall that accurately right now, but the officer was transferred. The duty station was moved. His was moved from zone 5 to zone 1. And the female officer was, her duty station remained at zone 5, where she was originally. Now, we do know that the woman involved here indicated that there was a party that when they went off duty, it was not unusual for officers to gather and consume alcohol and kind of debrief themselves and chill out on the back patio at zone 5 or in the parking lot. So as policy issues go, we are looking into the standards of alcohol consumption on city property, particularly as related to the police property, what they're supposed to do when they go off duty, and also how to manage protective orders against city police officers. Now that becomes important because it was indicated that she had received a protection order. In Pennsylvania, there are 3 types of protection orders: sexual violence protective order, traditional protection from abuse, a PFA under domestic violence laws, and a general protective order of protection. We understand that there was a protective order issued on a temporary basis, which is standard procedure. It's initially given as temporary with a hearing scheduled to determine whether it should be made permanent, and whatever details may be included in that protective order. Our understanding is that the protective order was initially issued the beginning of January, but for some reason, middle of, I guess around the 11th of January, the FOP intervened. We're not quite sure why. Records are sealed. We can't access the documents, but it is a curious thing for off-duty conduct to result in this becoming it was a personal matter, becoming a matter of public record, and why the FOP would intervene in this personal matter that is in front of the courts for a protective order. We don't understand that. We will try to pursue it to try to understand it. There is no criminal investigation going on right now. Apparently, the district attorney declined to file any charges against the accused. And the fact that the officer wasn't terminated is apparently what led the alleged victim to create the letter and to proceed to get a protective order. So we don't know. We're going to try to understand that better, why it would be of interest to the police union. There could speculate. I mean, what would be the connection to a work-related connection to a personal matter such as this that would attract the interest of the FOP? We do not know what that is, but we will try to find that out. right now in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police orders, there is a procedure to be followed related to domestic violence incidents and PFAs related to domestic violence. It's under the Officer Involved Domestic Violence Ordinance. It's also replicated in the Bureau of Police orders under domestic violence. It does not cover general protective orders. So that may be a recommendation we come back to you with as we determine if there's deficiencies or in the policies related to service of protective orders and sexual violence protective orders. Any questions on that incident?
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, you mentioned the FOP intervened. Did you say their intervention altered or had an impact on the PFA?
On the court order, no, it was continued. The hearing has been continued.
Okay,
They just
we don't know what they did. I got you. Thank you.
No, we do know as a matter of public record that the officer does have legal counsel. And as the record appears, the alleged victim is representing herself.
Was it at the request of the officer that the FOP became?
Don't know.
We don't know that.
We don't know, but both of them
Okay.
are members of the FOP.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is, I am saying it again, speculative. What could
Yeah.
the potential, what could the connection possibly be? If under this protective order, there was an order to relinquish a firearm, that could interfere with the accused officer's ability to do his job. Now that may be, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of that would bring a union interest into a personal matter before the courts on his behalf, on the accused behalf. But it still has nothing to do with the court. I mean, the court is not bound to any contract or working agreement between the FOP and the city. So I don't know what their interest is. We are trying to suss that out. And when we do and better understand it, we'll share that with you, certainly.
I mean, excuse me, have you seen this before where the FOP has gotten involved for a non-work related incident?
No, I have not. And
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we're going back a while now, Mr. Robinson, but when the whole issue of officer involved domestic violence came to the forefront and people acknowledged it was a real problem, and it was around the concept of power and how police involved domestic violence is not rare. Maybe rarer now than it was 13 years ago, but we had a huge community collaborative to address that issue, and City Council ultimately did adopt in the city code standards for officer involved domestic violence and directed the Bureau to include it in an operating policy, which they have 40-2, I think 40 something. We can provide that to you, but at any rate, in 2007 is when this became effective, and it dealt with that issue of the state laws, federal laws governing control of firearms related to PFAs. That ordinance captured at that time all the contemporary best practices. Now, we realize, looking at this case, that there are other protective orders that are not going to fit under the domestic violence class. And we want to be sure, and it wouldn't fit under arrests of a city officer. It wouldn't, it's a service of a process, and it is a court-related process that we suspect may be deficiently addressed in Pittsburgh Bureau of Police operating procedures. So that's why we're looking at that. But I have not. We looked at, we went through court records. We went through divorce records. We went through everything we could get our hands on back then to better understand the prevalence of the problem. And then the consequences for officers on the job who were subjects of PFAs. For a while, and right now, the court can order an officer or anybody could order me to relinquish my weapons if I was the subject and protection from abuse was ordered against me. And I would have to give up that firearm. It used to be that you could give it to any other person qualified to have the firearm. It could be the sheriff. That's typically where it goes. Now, as I understand it under the law, it must be, if there's a court order to relinquish the firearm, it must be handed over directly to the sheriff. This intermediary stuff it's not there anymore. But what was unique was that an officer could have an accommodation in that court order that they can't have their firearm until they go to work. When they report on duty, they can retrieve their firearm from the commander. And when they go off duty, they have to return it to the commander for safekeeping. So on duty, they have their firearm. Would you feel safe? No. But at any rate, that's how it used to be. But now, if that firearm is to be relinquished, we can't read the documents anymore, so we don't know if that's potentially the nexus where they come together and why it would be an employment interest, since they're both city cops, both members of the FOP.
And one other question, this is for some background, I guess. I mean, things that just kind of stood out to me. You mentioned that the command staff had all unanimously been in favor of termination, but the Director of Public Safety went against that and gave the suspension. Is that in line with normal proceedings, or does that occur? This seems interesting to me.
It was not challenged, nor would we'll talk a little bit about the disciplinary process when we get to the Mr. Rogers update, but what's important on this one, and it makes no sense, and I think it is as perplexing as you're describing, why, when everybody in this officer's chain of command wanted him fired, wasn't he fired? And the only one that can answer that is former public safety director, and he is gone. And what we're not certain of is whether or not the director of public safety at the time knew, or if the investigation knew, that in 2014, the same accused officer, in a sworn deposition that came about through a civil service complaint by a rookie, a recruit in the academy, I'm sorry, it wasn't even a rookie, female recruit, who complained that he had said something to the effect, and it is quoted, I believe, in news reports about it. But my recollection is that he said he should never work with women because all he wants to do is sleep with them. And that was an indicator back in 2014 that somebody should have had an eye on this guy. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just, these are indicative of maybe something's a little bit, worthy of supervisory attention or monitoring or something. And because now here we are, there's an issue about this same officer being accused of transporting an intoxicated female to her home and then doing something. She describes her condition as being not only intoxicated, but the physical description suggests that there may have been more than just alcohol involved, unbeknownst to her. So we don't know. The female should be back from military deployment any day, and we hope to speak to her directly. Anything else on that case, that incident? Okay, I'll move on to an update brief as it is, on the death of Mr. Rogers. It has been recently reported that the disciplinary action has started with the officers who were involved in that incident. There were 8 officers who were reportedly going to be disciplined as a result of their actions or inactions at the scene with Mr. Rogers' encounter with Officer Edmonds and all the officers who showed up thereafter, and the fact that he ended up dying the next morning. Last week, I think it was last week, it was reported, but back on January 11th, the court under Judge Rangos denied access to the district attorney to a report, the Internal Critical Incident Review Board's report on the death of Mr. Rogers, that incident. Internally, they convene a group of supervisors who conduct a review of all the facts. They conduct interviews. They do an assessment of compliance to administrative standards on any critical incident. Did the officers do their job the way they were trained and the way the orders say they're supposed to do their job? Now, it's an internal report. And apparently the district attorney wanted a copy of that report and alleges that he needs that information to determine whether there should be or to make a prosecutorial decision. Judge Rangos denied access. Now, what's happening in the community is it's being spun up as the city of Pittsburgh is obstructing the district attorney's ability to conduct a criminal investigation to arrive at a prosecutorial decision. And that's just not true. Because Mr. Rogers died in the course of a critical incident, well, that's what made it a critical incident. It was required under city policy, the Bureau of Police policy, that it be investigated by a third party, that it be an outside police agency that conducts the criminal investigation. So it was placed into the hands of Allegheny County Police Department. They stepped in immediately and they initiated and proceeded with their investigation for the purposes of determining any criminal culpability, to establish the facts and turn that over to the district attorney. You will recall the last time we met, the determination was pending the medical examiner's report on cause and manner of death. And then that was delivered, which, yeah, it was declared to be accidental, which is questionable. But that's what the medical examiner gave to the district attorney, who in turn, at that point, should have had Allegheny County's police report, the medical examiner's report, and had that which he needed to make a prosecutorial decision. Instead, he tried to get the Critical Incident Review Board's report, and Judge Rangos denied that. Now, reasons for that, I did not read the judge's decision. I don't know what the order said or what, if there was an opinion with it, I don't know. But if you consider that the internal administrative review, strictly for administrative purposes, potentially could have included review of material that would have been developed through the internal investigation protected under Garrity rights, which means they can't use that statement for any criminal proceeding. Now, if the district attorney has access to a Garrity statement, that would chill everything in terms of administrative review. So it was purely for internal purposes and could have exposed information that otherwise would have been protected or could have been self-incriminatory in the venue of the employment place, as opposed to being put into potential criminal assessment. So the judge denied access to that. And even before you get to that, the substance of that internal critical incident review report, the criminal investigation was conducted as required by an outside agency, Allegheny County PD. That is the criminal investigation. That's all a DA needs. So the city is not obstructing anything. It is in the interest of due process that that internal administrative review be protected. And we still all await a prosecutorial decision from the district attorney's office as to any criminal culpability on the officer's part that were involved in Mr. Rogers' incident that led to his death. Now, the call for the discipline that was started under former Mayor Peduto's administration under the Department of Public Safety director at the time. Now, what's important, I think, I don't know if it would be helpful. I can, when there's an incident happens and there's an investigation conducted, the findings go on up through the chain of command to the chief of police. When the chief signs off on the recommended discipline, in 14 days from then, the Department of Public Safety director reviews it and decides whether that director is going to accept or not accept or modify the recommendations in that which the chief sent over, which we just talked about in that other incident, was what happened. Everybody wanted the accused officer terminated. The director of public safety modified that and just made it a suspension and a reassignment. In that process, if there is a decision by the director of public safety that the subject officer objects to or finds to be somehow out of line, they have 14, that officer has 14 days after that decision by the Department of Public Safety director to request a hearing, an internal hearing. And that's what you're hearing about now, where those internal hearings just started. After those hearings are complete, there are 14 days more during which the officer can determine, or the FOP can determine, to grieve the decision of the public safety director that went to a hearing and the outcome of that hearing. So you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're talking, what, 70 days? Somebody help me out here, 14 times 5?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
During which that, from the beginning to the end, or to the point of filing a grievance, after which that goes into arbitration and all the rest of it. It's a tripartite process there. But you have 70 days for this thing to play out, which is why we're hearing now that hearings are beginning for the officers that were disciplined as a result of the Rogers incident. So we'll see what happens, but that's why it's taken so long. There is plenty of time for this to happen within, and they tend to take it out to the last minute that they have. Plus the transition from one administration to another. And that we have an acting public safety director now. And so hopefully in another couple of weeks, we will have a status update that somebody will leak, and we'll learn what the outcome of those hearing decisions are. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I guess I'm going back again, just trying to get used to the process here. So the Allegheny County Police turned over their findings from their investigation to the DA. DA had that, the medical examiner's report. Presumably he wanted additional information, which was blocked by Judge Rangos. And did the DA did they make a determination that they're not charging, or is that still in the air?
As far as we understand, it is still in the air.
Okay.
The very purpose of having the outside law enforcement agency conduct the criminal investigation is to avoid the conflict and to allow an internal administrative procedure to go forward. And that officer in due process, I mean, has the right to expect what happens internally is protected. And DA is trying to get protected information. And I believe that's why the judge denied it. It would have been, the officer could be conceivably, Bill, incriminate themselves with statements in the course of that investigation, right? I think you said right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And presumably that could throw out a case against them then, right?
it could what, Mr. Robinson, you broke up.
Would that possibly jeopardize any case that the DA wanted to bring? If they used that, or if they got that report?
It could. I would assume our solicitor would know the nuances of that better than I.
I'll just share that I mentioned to Ms. Pittinger earlier that a local resident contacted me about that decision to throw it out, and she was very upset that that is what had happened. And I didn't know enough of the legalistic perspective to respond to her. But she feels that we may be headed down the same road as what happened with Anton Rose in that case, without the DA being able to get more information. So that's just a perspective from a citizen here in my community.
Bill?
It's kind of hard to form an opinion on these facts as to whether it would jeopardize an ongoing investigation or ultimately a prosecution. I defer to add more information on that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the taser update?
I have one more thing, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is to give background to some of the discussion going on in the public realm now about policy changes that council is considering. One that they did adopt, which is the traffic stop violations. And two, Reverend Burgess has presented and proposed a review and restriction on stop and frisk practices in the city of Pittsburgh. Now, a lot of these things seem intuitively to be the result of bias or something else, but until we really know what it looks like, it's hard to feel confident. So what I did was I have a couple of charts here taken from the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police Annual Service Report from 2020. And I'm having a little trouble getting it up here, so I may not actually be able to do this. It keeps kicking me back to some strange place, which is not my desktop. Oh, well, maybe I will not be able to share this with you, and for that I apologize. Just give me one more try here. There we go. Okay, we'll come back to you. There's Emma.
Excuse me,
You're not
Beth,
seeing
while
it. Yes, sir.
while you're searching for that, I did want to just quickly to the Rogers case. Just something, again, thinking of the community, you had mentioned something about some people speculating or saying that the city was obstructing that report from being. I just think there are a couple points in this whole matter that probably we need to be definitely certain on. One is that it wasn't the city that did that. The DA did receive a finding or report investigation from the county police, who is expected to do that investigation. And that judge, Rangos, is the one that stopped that internal report from getting to the DA. Just thinking of people finger pointing to be assured of what's happening there, and that all those things happen that way, and it's not outside of that. There's still some questions there, but I don't know, just making sure that we're all clear on that, that when you see misinformation or something otherwise, that we know that this is actually what we're looking at with this case.
Sure. We do know that the Allegheny County Police Department was responsible for that investigation, and that publicly it had been announced that he was waiting for the medical examiner's report, which then was publicly announced that it was given to him. The propriety of handing over the internal report is the point of controversy. And my view is that it would be inappropriate because it was not a criminal investigation. It was an internal administrative investigation, which would have required officers to give statements without the benefit of having counsel or the right to remain silent or to not give a statement, because in the employment situation, the Garrity statement requires, under the threat of discipline, that the statement in its truth be given to the inquiring employer, which could be incriminating, which is why the Garrity statement is precluded from any criminal process against an individual. And
so I guess, yeah, I'm sorry. I guess what I'm getting at with that is the judge who potentially could be looked at as, oh, you're stopping information, you're hindering this investigation. But and actually, see, the judge might have been, I won't say looking out for the DA, but basically doing what was required of her. So yeah, I just want to make sure that that's clear. It wasn't like the city was trying to inhibit this. The judge wasn't inhibiting it. Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome. It's a tough one, and it can go, okay, I have here, we shall see. There we go. Okay, do you all see arrests 2020?
Yes.
Okay, just quickly, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. The numbers speak for themselves. The arrests in 2020 are indicated by percentage, by racial breakdown. The number of arrests, percentage 65, a little over 65% African American, and about 32% were white. Demographic representation in the city is this is out of balance with the 23% African American demographic, and you have this looking at this for the arrest, all arrests. Here we go to our zones where we know there are population demographics that zone 5, for example, is presumed to be predominantly an African American zone, that they are the dominant group in that particular police zone. And here you have something that looks like there are, obviously there's going to be more African Americans arrested in that zone because there are more of them who live in that particular police zone. Maybe, maybe not, but zone 1, similar demographic, and you have also a very high arrest rate in those two zones compared to the other zones that are predominantly white. And I have a little dog fight going behind me. I apologize to everyone for that. Use of force numbers become a whole different thing. Again, 23% community demographic overall, with 61% use of force on African Americans. What is white people subjected to force? 35% of the use of force incidents that occurred in 2020. Marijuana enforcement, another glaring, questionable illustration, where 77.9% of marijuana enforcement actions were against African Americans, whereas only 16% enforcement actions on marijuana were against white people. 23% demographic for African Americans. Motor vehicle pursuits. Now, this is where it gets to be a little more of a contemporary issue related to public policy being discussed. But here, 73% of the motor vehicle pursuits in 2020 were against African Americans, 23% of the demographic. 13.5, so say 14% of people pursued were white. That speaks for itself. Motor vehicle stop, frisk, and enforcement actions. These are the situations where there's a traffic stop and the individual is frisked for the presence of contraband. So 57% of those frisks were pursuant to a motor vehicle stop were of African Americans, and 16% were white. We're talking here, 57% of all the stops, the person was frisked when the demographic is 23%. Field contacts, warrantless search and seizure. That would be your traditional idea of a stop and frisk. These are people walking along, there's a contact made, and the person is searched. They're frisked. They call it a Terry pat down, they call it a lot of things, but it's a 23% demographic, and 71% of the people stopped and frisked were African American. 26% were white. Our other ethnic communities are negligible for purposes of this. And here you have the total traffic stops, which in contrast to those who were frisked after a traffic stop is kind of interesting, because here you have, again, we're talking about 23% representation demographically, but 47% of people stopped were African American. 46% of people stopped were white. So, you know, it shouldn't be that close, but it's closer than what we see in other categories. But look at what happens when you start to look at how does it become invasive. It becomes invasive for African Americans, much more so than it does for whites. And we're only talking about 23% of the population. So that's the backdrop to the kind of discussion we're hearing about public policy now. And when you see these patterns, they beg for an explanation and the caution that the bias that may be involved in this really does demand attention. And some of that maybe will be resolved with some of the proposals such as Reverend Burgess is making. But it's probably more likely that we need to look more deeply at training and protocols. And that's all. That was just to give you an idea, illustrate what those disparities really do look like. I expect 2021 to be out soon, and we will make a comparative for that, and we can discuss that.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes, sir.
Some of that data. Do we have, well, I don't know if I'm sure we have it. I don't know if we have the chance to review it. The arrest data that might correspond with that. I know in New York City, when you looked at their period of their intense stop and frisk, I think upwards of 90% of those stopped and frisked were not arrested. And I'm just curious, out of these numbers, do we have high arrests, which would warrant there might have been something criminal going on, or a bunch of non-arrests, which says, all right, why were we doing these stops? And then also what those arrests look like across racial demographics is too. Was there a similar proportion of whites arrested who were stopped, even though it was at a lesser rate than African Americans being stopped? So I'm just curious what that would look like as part of the discussion.
Arrest pursuant to a stop and frisk and a motor vehicle, right?
Correct.
Okay. And okay, I think it is, some of that is available, and we'll put that together for you, Mr. Robinson, for next board meeting to report back.
Thank you. I think, again, just the point of that, I know the narrative often is that this stops crime and all that. And if we see that we had all these stops and you weren't making arrests, then there wasn't necessarily a crime occurring. Discretion, obviously, granted there, but that still tells a story.
Well, that's a huge indicator that isn't captured, and that is the discretionary arrests.
Yeah.
and conviction rates. But that's a whole other discussion another day, I
Yeah.
suppose. But we'll put that together and as best we can, and hopefully by then we'll have some preliminary 2021 numbers to compare it with. That high number of the stops and the field contacts, just the casual encounter where they pat people down, even that is so suspicious because it's not justifiable under the law to just pat anybody down when you encounter them. It's just not. There are two things that have to be present. And maybe our solicitor will recall what the second one is, but you have to have reasonable suspicion that there's something going on, some crime is afoot basically, and that the person is armed. But even that, to have that encounter, to force that person to engage with you if they don't want to, you can't decide that, oh, you don't want to talk to me, I'm going to talk to you, and grab them and then, proceed with a frisk. There's a lot of practices that are simply not lawful practices, but have become acceptable. And I think that's where those charts kind of poke a little bit to look deeper into it. Well, we'll get that together for you. Anything else that I can answer?
I just think the
offer?
numbers are, worth us looking closely at, and the concern around profiling, just walking down the street and what's the possibility of a individual of color being frisked versus an individual who's not. And you can, have all the cultural awareness and sensitivity trainings, but if people don't really think differently, the same behavior exists. So I don't know how we get at that, because I know training is taking place in Pittsburgh, but still we have the high numbers for African Americans.
And that's why you see some of the proposals, such as Councilman Burgess has been presenting.
Yeah.
Because if there's no other way to get at this stuff, then let's start making laws to get at it.
Yeah.
And then you just create another need for some other kind of an enforcement. So
True.
I think that's where your supervision has to go hand in hand with the policy, right? You can have the policy, but if the supervisors aren't monitoring that, so if you have all these if you have reasonable suspicion in hundreds of cases and yet there's no arrest, well, what was that suspicion? What was causing you to do that? And then you look at what factors might be very pleasant or present. Race.
Yep.
That's the key, Mr. Robinson. How do you get at that whole concept of seeing the individual and not the color, and the behavior that goes along with that? So that's the piece that is almost $1 million question for us to be able to change it, to get at it. But it's incumbent to still provide the information to make people more sensitive that does exist.
And we are learning that the second NYPD officer that was shot last week has died.
Yeah.
We had a couple of other officers across the country die this week. The number of duty-related law enforcement deaths is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
They're particularly evil ways in which they're dying, the ambushes and things that are just despicable, which brings a counterbalance to the discussion about how do we manage over-policing, if it's over-policing, right, Mr. Robinson, if we can tie it to that, or if it's something else or whatever it may be, but also the interest of officer safety. And I already anticipate the arguments about stop and frisk and all the rest of it, that officer safety will be the number one resistance, that we don't want to compromise off. No, neither do we. We want to be sure that everybody is safe. And when there is an encounter, they both go away safely, but that initial encounter is valid. Because we don't want a cop talking to somebody who has some nefarious idea, or no, stay away from them. Don't talk to people unless you really have to talk to them. And then if you're the person that's been tagged to be talked to, behave yourself. Don't be carrying contraband, and don't hurt somebody. But I know that that's the very delicate time right now with this tension between police reform, community demands, and everybody's safety. It's an interesting time. I don't know. That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pittinger.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, we will move on. Is there any new business? Okay, we will take the case reviews, and these are the recommendations coming from the investigators. As we mentioned earlier, the public hearing has been rescheduled for next month, and we'll have an update for the next meeting. We have 2 cases for full investigation, 22121 and 17721. Are there any questions about either of these cases?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. May I have a motion to accept the 2 cases for full investigation?
So moved.
It has been moved. May I have a second, please?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. We'll take all of the cases as a whole unless there is a question about one of the cases. The next is 30-day extension of full investigation. We have 2 cases there, 16521 and 10721. Are there any questions about either of these cases? If not, may I have a motion to accept the 2 cases for full investigation?
So moved.
It's been moved. Second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have 3 cases that's been unsustainable, so they are being recommended for dismissal. They are case 15521 and 11121 and 5720. So these cases are being recommended for dismissal as unsustainable. May I have a motion?
So moved.
It has been moved, and may I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
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 And opposed? There are no opposed. We have 1 case as being unfounded, and that's 16821. I need a motion to dismiss this case as unfounded.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay, go ahead. You got it. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded to dismiss case 16821. We have another case that is authorized for a hearing, and that is case 08421.
Chairman, did you vote on the last motion?
Thought I did.
Yes.
Yes, I thought I did. Yes. Okay. So 08421.
Madam
motion.
Chair, that is a recommendation for rude and discourteous hearing, to include this complainant in a rude and discourteous hearing, which we're getting close to having a full roster for.
So we still need to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. So may I have a motion for 8421?
So moved.
A second? Mr. Robinson, will you second it for me?
Oh, I thought I heard another you. Second.
Okay, it has been moved and properly seconded to move 08421 to authorize a rude and discourteous hearing. We now have 7 suspensions, and we will suspend these until February. 16221, 16021, 14821, 13821, 12621, 12121, and 09921. May I have a motion to suspend these until February?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
it has been moved and properly seconded to suspend the 7 cases until February. All right, and the listing
Vote.
you have are the
vote.
summary.
Oh,
have to vote.
Now I do need a vote. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. And we have a listing of all of the continued suspensions at the back of the summary of cases that you received for today. Okay, those are the cases. Our next meeting is February 25th, and it will be via Zoom. And Ms. Stephanie, are there any individuals who would like to have public comment?
Yes, Miss Jermaine Brown. So I'll unmute her.
Okay. Ms. Brown, you may, well,
you can
she's
unmute
still.
yourself, Miss Brown.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't know when you guys were going to say something to me. Give me 1 second. Let me find this house. All right. Hello?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
How you doing?
Okay.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I just was invited to this Zoom. And do you guys want to hear my story?
There's a procedure that you have to go through to share whatever is going on with you with the board and an investigator. So I don't know what your story is and if it's appropriate at this time or if you need to go through the process.
Okay. All right. Well, I sent the form to you guys. I think it was sometime in November, maybe. I had a situation. An attorney had sent me to you guys.
Mhm.
And I went through somewhere a police sergeant had told me he had called some people for me, and I had went that route, and I didn't hear from nobody. And the attorney she had pressed me to basically go get the form notarized and sent to this review board.
Okay. I'm going to have Ms. Pittenger to respond to maybe a follow-up, Ms. Pittenger, with him. She's
You're
trying
muted,
to
Beth.
she's trying to unmute
She's
herself.
trying to unmute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she can't do it.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
do you have a complaint number? Because we can talk to you offline. Or is
I don't know if I think I do. I think
Okay.
I do. I'm sorry. I have this situation happened all the way in September.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
I had an issue with the police, and I had they tore my truck apart, and I had I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. When I took my truck to the police station and I showed them because my bumper was hanging and everything, my rearview mirror, everything was hanging off. And I took it to the police station, and this is where I ended up with you guys as far as the lawyer told me to go to y'all because nothing was transpiring from the original people that the sergeant called. which is his name was Jesse Burke. He was some investigator that was supposed to have investigate, but he was asking me questions. Yeah, he called me and he asked me a couple questions, and I never heard nothing else. So a lawyer, attorney Wendy Williams, she told me to she gave me the form and everything, and she was mad because I took long as I did to go this route. And I've been listening to you guys, and I don't know, I think my situation, it's a lot similar to every situation that's been going on. I was driving through a neighborhood. I was up at a football field. I left an unmarked car. I guess it was a truck. It busted a U-turn in the middle of the street. It followed me. I pulled to whereas there was a crowd, and I was a little scared. The truck came around the corner. It didn't pull behind me. It pulled in front of me, like, it cut me off and then turned the lights on. So now the lights are on. And do you guys want me to tell you my story? Because I don't know if it's.
I think it may be more appropriate, Mr. Brown, if Ms. Pittinger give you some instructions how we can follow up with you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Obviously you guys are not aware of the paper that I sent, but I did everything that you wanted me to do.
Well, I don't want you to reach that conclusion yet.
Yeah.
So Ms. Pittinger, yeah.
Mr. Brown, we'll check with our intake director and see if actually you do have a case with us.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I think
Michelle just confirmed that.
Yes.
Ms. Gamble is our director, so we know how to reach out to you. And apparently
it's been assigned too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let us reach out to you tomorrow and we'll get this straightened out and see where we stand with this. By any chance, did you file a claim with the law department in the city of Pittsburgh?
I forget what it was called. I had took my truck to the police station and their commander called. I'm not home, and I forgot what it was called. It was letters, I guess, and
OMI maybe.
Excuse me.
OMI.
Yes, ma'am. That's who they called, and I was contacted by somebody. I think his name was Jesse Burke. He asked me 2 questions. I didn't hear anything else, and then after I talked to him, I got charges for small amount of marijuana in the mail. Like a month later after this, after I spoke with him, it kind of escalated the situation with the officers.
Okay, well, we have contact information for you, and we will follow up with you. Michelle, would you make sure that we reach out or the investigator reaches out tomorrow? Stephanie? Yeah.
Yes, we will. Michelle's
and
muted,
that way
but
we will know if we received it or at the board, or if your complaint went to OMI and we may have just received it through OMI.
I think you guys received it from me.
Okay.
To go to the south side and get it notarized, and I paid for it to get there overnight and tracked it and everything.
Okay, Mr. Brown, we'll be in touch tomorrow. Your investigator will be in touch with you tomorrow, and we'll go from there.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. We're here for people who want us to hear their situation. So thank you so much.
I wanted to tell you guys my story. I've been sitting here listening. I've been listening to a lot of situations that were more serious than mine. But then when you guys start talking about the other thing, it kind of sounded like my situation as far as the ratio with the blacks, the neighborhood, all that stuff. Everything fit perfect to a T. Because we are being targeted, and I was targeted for nothing. And I guess now when I finally see the search warrant, I'm a gangbanger now, I'm a drug dealer now, but actually I go to Triangle Tech and I'm a hard-working citizen. So I would love to tell my story, but I'll wait. I'll wait.
Well, we will hear your case once it's considered by the investigator and a determination is made. So just be assured that there will be follow-up. And again, come back another month and to be in our audience, because we're here for citizens.
Okay,
So
I just want to see a change. I'm going to be here every month now. I didn't know that. There's actually like 4 of us in the room now. I mean, we're all trying to see if something's going to happen from this, because this is really outrageous.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
But we're here as your advocates, so just remember that.
I appreciate it. I'll
Okay.
leave soon. I guess I'll wait. Enjoy.
Okay.
Hey, y'all,
All right.
got
Thank you.
great-
Thank you. Okay, the Ozarks wished us a happy new year, so I'm pleased they're in the audience.
Yep.
I don't see anything else, Stephanie. Do you?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Well, that will conclude what we had on the agenda for tonight. Is there anything that any of the board members will want to bring up at this time? Okay. Well, Ms. Stephanie, you'll keep us informed of the information for the hearing
Yes.
next month. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
All righty.
Just do an
Thank you.
adjournment vote.
Yes, we need an adjournment. Adjournment.
So
Yes, okay,
moved.
so Dr. Gershio has moved second.
Second.
Oh, okay, I think Kiki was doing it too. All in favor, aye.
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 Okay, opposed. Okay, folks, be safe and stay warm. And I want to at least acknowledge all of the support we have on this board from the investigators, Mr. Ward and Ms. Hampton. So thank you all for all of